I've winter sown. Now what? I've received what feels like hundreds of questions about what to do next after winter sowing, and in this video, I will be attempting to answer some of them. Where do I put the containers? Do I have to water? What about when it gets really cold? And stick around to the end because I will be showing you a sneak peek of some itty bitty seedlings that have begun poking their heads out of the soil in my winter sown bags. It's so exciting. Let's get started. Welcome to Finding Joy in the Garden. Where do I put my containers? I like to put my containers in an area that gets full sun to part shade. And in winter, most places don't get as much sun as they do in the summertime. Every property has different microclimates, so you probably know what areas in your property that would be best for your winter sown containers. You want an area that's not too windy. You do not want an area that's in complete shade. And of course, you don't want to put your containers too far away from you. So I always say, out of sight is out of mind. You want to put the containers where you can see them because you will be checking up on them. One of the major areas I put my winter sown containers are in garden beds. My favorite place is this one area close to my house. It stays the warmest throughout the year. It gets just enough sunlight. It also gets some shade. If you're going to put your containers next to your house, please remember not to put it directly under the roof where it won't get rain, and don't put it where the rain from the roof would fall directly on your containers. Remember that as winter comes to an end and we get more into spring, you'll likely have more sunlight reaching whatever area you pick. So keep an eye on your containers. You may have to move them a little bit, provide some shade for them, or increase ventilation in the containers. As we get into warmer temperatures, you want to protect your seedlings because this is not a baking show. You do not want to bake your plants. What about ventilation? Now, ventilation is especially important if you're winter sowing in bags. But the great thing is they are zipper bags, so you can zip and unzip them as needed. If it gets warmer, unzip the bag, open it up so it can get some more air. And if it's colder, you can zip it back up. I've got critters on my property. How do I protect them? Now, I know some of you deal with raccoons and dogs and cats and other animals going through your property and wreaking havoc. Now, if you have critters on your property, you probably have spaces where you already protect plants from critters, like a bed that's protected with chicken wire or a fence. That would be a great place to put your winter sown containers. You could also just throw some chicken wire over the bags, build a small mini fence with chicken wire, and I'm sure you can come up with some other way to protect your plants. So if you can, leave those in the comment section. It might help someone else. Do I need to water? The answer is maybe. The whole purpose of winter sowing is to let nature take care of these plants outside, but you are still in charge, so you need to check on your containers. If there isn't enough rain or snow to keep your plants watered, you will have to do the job. You want to look for condensation in the containers. So on a milk jug, you're looking for water droplets on the inside. Same thing with the freezer bags. You can lift the container up to feel how heavy it is. If it feels light, so lighter than it was when you planted it, it may just be that the soil is drying out. You have options to water overhead with a hose, and that's easier if you're watering jugs. If you're watering the bags, you may need to open the bags first so that the water can get into the bag. You can also bottom water your containers. So you get a bowl with water in it and sit the container in the bowl, let it absorb that water from the bottom. This is especially useful if you're winter sowing in bags or in cups. Those tend to dry out faster than milk jugs. What if it gets really, really cold? Do I have to cover them? The answer is, it depends. Now, I garden in Zone 8A in Georgia, and most of the time I have not had to cover my containers. They did just fine. But I do understand there are many other places where things can get even colder. Now, if you live in one of these zones and you winter sow and you have to protect your containers, please leave a comment so everyone else knows what they can do in their zone. Now, like I said, for my zone, I've only had to cover once and I was being extremely cautious. I had some containers that I didn't cover, they did fine, and some containers I did. So I would say for comfort, if you feel like it's getting too cold, you can cover them. If they're really small seedlings that had just germinated and haven't really gotten acclimatized to the cold, or if there's a very big shift in temperature, so it was really warm and now it's going to be really cold, there is no harm in throwing a frost cloth over these containers to save them. Better safe than sorry. And this is especially true if you're growing plants that don't like the cold. So warm loving crops, you can probably cover those. These are the ways that I would suggest covering your containers with frost cloth. You could throw the frost cloth over the containers, hold it down with a stone so it doesn't blow away in the wind. If we're being fancy, you can build a little hoop house using ladder mesh and the frost cloth. But the easiest way is probably just to put 2 containers on either side of your winter sown jugs and bags and throw a frost cloth over them. This way, the weight of snow does not press down on the bags. When do I open the containers? The answer is when the seedlings are large enough and the temperature is warm enough. When there's no frost in sight and when you can actually keep an eye on them to make sure if there's any change in temperature, you can do something about it. The other answer is when you're ready to transplant them. Do I need to harden them off? Not really. That's the joy of winter sowing. These plants are growing outside in the cold in different types of weather, and they are already used to the weather outside. So you don't really need to harden them off. If you want to, you can open the containers the day before you transplant them, but I've opened them just before I put them in the ground. That's usually what I do, and they do just fine. I don't have much outdoor space. I only have a patio or deck. Can I still winter sow? Well, the question is, do you get enough sun exposure in your patio or deck to grow plants? If so, I believe you can. I have grown some thyme plants on my patio just because, and they did fine. You can put your winter sown jugs on your patio and the plants should germinate just fine. If you're winter sowing in bags or in cups, you might want to place them on a saucer or an aluminum baking tray, which you can get at the Dollar Tree. You can put it in that, some kind of container to hold the water. And that would make it easier to water these plants because you can bottom water them in those containers. Also, you're protecting your deck. That's great too. If it gets cold, just like with winter sowing outside, you can cover them with a frost cloth. Can I set it and forget it? Not really. Regular checks are important. You want to make sure they're getting enough water. You'd like to know if any pests are bothering them so you can deal with them. I have had an issue with slugs in just one of my containers, and I had to evacuate the plants from that container and transplant them into another container. You want to know if you need to move the location, if they're getting too much sun, too little sun. And like I said, out of sight is out of mind, so put them somewhere where you can see them so you remember to check up on them, especially if you're dealing with smaller containers. Now here is your sneak peek of the little seedlings that have come up in my winter sown bags. Aren't they so cute? This is Gaillardia. It's a flower. And I'm so excited because I grew it last year and it was so beautiful. So I want way more of them this year. If you have any extra tips or tricks that you think will be helpful for anyone who is winter sowing, please leave them in the comment section. If there are questions I haven't addressed, you can also leave them there. I'll try to get to them. If you haven't watched the video on winter sowing, either in jugs or in plastic bags, you can click on this playlist that has all the videos I've made on winter sowing and choose the one that you are interested in. If you liked this video or found it helpful in any way, pretty please take a second to like the video. Subscribe, I will be making more videos on winter sowing and showing you how these plants do in the garden over the course of the year. So you don't want to miss that. Thank you so much for joining me in the garden in my home today. And until next time, may you always find joy in your garden and your life. Bye, garden friend.